It's a Saturday morning so quiet you can hear the wind dancing through the trees. I'm on the porch of my hunting lodge, coffee in hand, watching the sun paint the fields of my family's land golden. Suddenly, a gleaming white SUV barrels into my driveway, spitting gravel like it's an action movie. Out steps Vanessa Caldwell, the self-proclaimed empress of Willow Creek Estates, clutching a leather notebook like it's the Bible. With a smile sharper than a knife, she demands, I tear down my grandfather's hunting lodge because it doesn't match the neighborhood's charm. I lean back in my chair, take a long sip and press a button. My sprinkler system kicks on, turning her fancy shoes into a mud bath. The video of that, still floating around online. But how did we get here? Let's rewind. I'm Jack Ramsey, county sheriff back in Tennessee after years in the Marines. This lodge isn't just boards and nails. It's where my grandfather taught me to track deer, tell stories under the stars, and love this land. It's where he passed, peacefully, a year ago. It's my legacy and no one's touching it. It all started when I returned to Willow Creek, a slice of land so peaceful, the biggest drama used to be old Mr. Jenkins leaving his lawnmower running all night. Neighbors would gather on porches, sharing cold beers and tall tales about the fish that got away at the lake. Fines, lawsuits? That was big city nonsense. Not a place where the worst crime was forgetting to return Miss Marjorie's casserole dish. I grew up here but left long ago, years serving overseas with sand in my pockets and orders in my head. Until my grandfather's. Death yanked me back, like a rope you didn't know was still tied to you. The hunting lodge was my North Star. Nestled among tall pines and hills that changed colors with the sun, it felt more alive than most people. Built by my grandfather's own hands, every creaky wooden board told a story. Nights of laughter, the smell of burning firewood, him teaching me to clean a rifle while talking about patience. It was my temple, my place to breathe deep and hear his echoes. It sat outside the boundaries of Willow Creek Estates, that shiny new neighborhood where the houses looked like they leapt out of a decorating magazine, all identical, with lawns so perfect they seemed painted. I didn't care about them, and I thought the feeling was mutual. Until Vanessa showed up. She arrived 6 months ago, like a high-heeled tornado with gold-rimmed glasses, fresh from some glossy Atlanta office, where she probably ran meetings. With a $12 coffee in hand, Vanessa seemed out of place in Willow Creek, but acted like the town was lucky to have her. I first saw her at Pete's General Store, her blonde hair flawless and her face like she'd just bitten a lemon. She was arguing with the cashier because, get this, the local coffee didn't have almond milk. How do you survive without options? She asked, as if we were living in the dark ages. Poor Pete just shrugged and I nearly laughed out loud while grabbing my beer from the cooler. But the real shock came weeks later when she showed up at my gate. I was fixing a fence, sweaty, dirt on my hands, when I heard the sound of expensive tires crunching gravel. Vanessa stepped out of her gleaming white SUV, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. She wore a navy blazer and had that smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Hi, I'm Vanessa, president of the Homeowners Association, she said, as if I should write the title down. Before I could respond, she handed me a petition, rattling off about aesthetic standards and how my hunting lodge, a rustic structure, she called it, was devaluing the neighborhood. I blinked, trying to figure out if it was a joke. The lodge was here long before her mansions, before the idea of an HOA even existed. It was older than the paved road she drove to get here. Look, I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. This cabin's part of my family. It's none of your business. Big mistake. Her eyes glinted like I'd just thrown a gauntlet on a poker table. Vanessa doesn't hear no. She hears the sound of someone begging to be broken. I see, she replied, with that tone of someone already plotting their next move. We'll talk again. She turned on her heels, and the click of her shoes on the gravel sounded like a war drum. Days later, the circus began. I woke up with the sun barely rising and saw my fence turned into a bureaucratic billboard. Signs reading "Property of Willow Creek Estates" were nailed into the wood like royal decrees, pinned with shiny tacks that screamed "Official." One blocked the dirt trail to the lodge, with red letters blaring "Restricted Access." Another had the goal to cover my grandfather's hand-carved sign, "Ramsey's Retreat," which he made with a pocket knife one summer afternoon, chuckling as wood shavings flew. That sign was more than a name. It was a piece of him. Seeing. That laminated paper over it, it felt like a punch to the gut. I'm not one to blow up. Years dealing with dumb orders in the military taught me to swallow anger, but this was personal. I grabbed a knife, ripped down every sign with a satisfying tear, and tossed them into a bonfire behind the lodge. Under the moonlight, the flames devoured the Willow Creek Estates in bold letters, and the smell of burning paper gave me a fleeting peace. I sat there, beer in hand, the crackle of the fire blending with the crickets. For a second I thought, I'd won, sweet delusion. The next morning I went to grab firewood, and there they were. New signs gleaming like they were mocking me. Not just on the fence, but on trees, along the trail, even on the crooked post where I tie my horse sometimes. It was like Vanessa had a secret printing press and an army of bureaucratic elves working overnight. Each nail seemed to say, "Try again, hillbilly." My patience, which wasn't exactly abundant, was crumbling like stale biscuits. Then came the fines. White envelopes started appearing in my mailbox with an HOA logo that looked like it was designed in PowerPoint by someone with too much free time. I opened the first one out of curiosity. Non-compliant structure, it said, with a grainy photo of the lodge, as if my cabin were a crime against humanity. The next? Illegal bonfire. Seriously? Burning some papers was now an FBI case? The third was the final blow. Wildlife disturbance. Apparently, leaving birdseed out for the birds, something I've done since I was a kid because my grandfather said it brought luck, was a threat to biodiversity. Each fine came with an absurd amount, like $200, and a note on letterhead. Please, resolve your status with the association. Resolve? I wasn't even part of their damn association. It was like getting fined for breathing in your own backyard. I sat on the porch with the envelopes scattered across the wooden table, the sun beating down on my neck, trying to keep my cool. I called old Tom, who'd been a lawyer before retiring, to fish all day. He laughed so hard he nearly choked. "That's abuse, kid. Your property line's older than that fancy neighborhood." He helped me draft an official notice citing property laws, old maps, and the exact line where Vanessa's power ended, good few yards before my fence. I mailed it, certified delivery, picturing her face as she opened it. I thought it'd make her back off, maybe even apologize. Fat chance. Vanessa doesn't back down. She strikes. One night, I got home after a day chopping firewood, body sore, and the smell of sweat clinging to my shirt. The lodge was pitch black. Odd. The sky was clear. No sign of a storm, and I could hear the hum of the streetlights down the road. I flipped the switch. Nothing. Tried again, as if stubbornness could fix the universe. Silence. I grabbed the flashlight from my Jeep and went to the meter, out back, locked in a rusty metal box. The display was dead, and the lever flipped off, by hand, with a plastic seal that screamed, "Official, don't touch." My blood boiled. This wasn't lightning or a loose wire. This was a low blow. I called the power company, choking back rage while an operator with an elevator voice read off protocol. "Sorry, sir. We received a report of a hazard. Dangerous, unoccupied structure." Unoccupied? I lived there. Dangerous? The lodge passed inspection before Vanessa ever dreamed of Willow Creek. I had to fax the deed. Yes, fax, because apparently the company's stuck in 1995, and explain that the structure was my home, not some abandoned ruin. It took 3 hours of red tape, but the lights came back on. As the bulbs hummed again, I sat on the porch with a warm beer, staring into the dark pines. This wasn't just a fight over fences or stupid signs anymore. It was an ambush. Vanessa wanted my lodge wiped off the map, and she was willing to play dirty to do it. If she thought I'd blow up, make a scene, or worse, give up, she didn't know me. Years in deserts, waiting hours for a radio signal, or freezing midnights holding position without sleep, taught me one thing. Patience is a weapon. I wasn't going to bang on her gate with a baseball bat. I'd play her game, only better. I started filing everything. Every letter with that tacky HOA logo, every ridiculous fine, improper use of bird seed, Really? Every sign she nailed into my land like she owned the county. I took photos, time-stamped, showing the shiny nails and the letters screaming Willow Creek Estates. I kept receipts for everything. The firewood I bought to burn her signs, the gas for the generator I used that night without power, even the bitter coffee I drank while waiting for the fax. I went further. I talked to the real neighbors, the ones with dirt on their hands and stories on their tongues. Ms. Marjorie, who made peach jam for her grandkids, said Vanessa fined her son for leaving a skateboard in the garage, too visible, per the letter. Old Jenkins, who never turned off his lawnmower, admitted he stopped hanging Christmas lights because she threatened to call a lawyer over excessive brightness. Excessive brightness. Each one gave me a piece of the puzzle. Vanessa wasn't just my headache. She was a clipboard-wielding plague, terrorizing anyone who didn't bow to her reign. I kept it all in an old notebook of my grandfather's, its leather cover smelling of time. I jotted down dates, names, even the way she glared at the lodge. When she drove by, that look of someone sizing up land for a strip mall. It wasn't time to act yet. I wanted her to think she was winning, that I was just a stubborn hick who'd fold soon. I let the fines pile up, answered with silence, even stopped tearing down her signs just to let her relax. But while I played it cool, Vanessa, she doesn't stop. She escalates. One Saturday morning, with the sun barely warming the hills, I went to check the trail behind the lodge. The ground was torn up like someone decided to rally race in my backyard. Thick, deep tire marks sliced through the dirt all the way to the creek, where my grandfather taught me to skip stones when I could barely reach his knees. This wasn't a lost neighbor or a teenager goofing off. It was deliberate. I followed the tracks, my stomach tightening with every step until I reached the water's edge. What I saw stopped me cold. A mountain of trash dumped like a truck had puked it out. Rotten planks reeking of mold, rusted paint cans, dried splatters like old blood, crumbling drywall mixed with torn plastic bags. This wasn't some lazy jerks litter. It was sabotage with a capital S.I. stood there, boots in the mud, the creek's murmur drowned out by the anger rising in my chest. I looked at the lodge a few yards away, its weathered beams steady as my grandfather's pride. Then it hit me, clear as Willow Creek's sky. Vanessa wasn't just annoying me with fines and signs. She wanted my land. Not the lodge itself. That wooden temple was just an obstacle. The property, with its hilltop views and year-round singing creek, was gold to someone like her. She probably already had an architect in Atlanta, sketching a luxury condo complex, with names like Horizon Villas and signs boasting starting at $2 million. The lodge, with its memories of laughter and coffee brewing on a wood stove, was the only thing standing in the way of her progress. I could have called in backup. Old Tom, with his maps and city hall connections, would have raised hell. Ms. Marjorie would probably organize a protest with cake and posters. But I don't ask for help when the fight's mine. I grew up hearing my grandfather say, "Be your own sheriff." And I like the long game. I went back to the lodge, grabbed a shovel, and spent the morning clearing the trash, one plank at a time. Each can I tossed into the trailer felt like a promise. She wouldn't break me, but cleaning wasn't enough. Vanessa was playing dirty, and I needed proof. In town, I bought 3 trail cameras, the kind hunters use to spot deer. Small, camouflaged, with night vision that catches the glint in a raccoon's eyes. I spent the afternoon setting them up, choosing spots carefully. One on a gnarled oak near the trail, another tucked in branches above the creek, and the third aimed at the lodge's entrance, right where the tire marks started. I adjusted each one, tested the angles, erased any trace I'd been there. It was like setting an ambush in the desert, except my enemy wore heels and carried a clipboard. Everything recorded, everything saved, waiting for her next move. The spark came like lightning in a clear sky. It was a quiet Saturday, the sun gilding the hills and the smell of fresh-cut grass in the air. Grass I cut carefully, bag up, and sell to the town stable to pay the bills. I was at the lodge fixing a creaky window when I heard the roar of heavy engines, not the mailman or the firewood truck. I stepped out and nearly swallowed my screwdriver. 3 event trucks, the kind that haul fancy weddings, had invaded my field like I'd rented out my yard. Wide tires crushed the grass, my grass leaving ruts like scars. Before I could process it, a crew in suits and clipboards started setting up white tents, big enough for a circus. Fairy lights twinkled on cables, golden chairs that looked pricier than my couch were lined up with military precision, and a buffet table grew with trays that smelled like money. I stood there, trying to figure out if I was dreaming or if Willow Creek had turned into a reality show without telling me. Then came the decorator, a skinny guy with round glasses and a vest that screamed, "I'm from Atlanta." He pointed at my tractor, parked by the fence where it always sits. "Sorry, buddy," he said, with that tone of someone doing you a favor, "but that thing's ruining the aesthetic. Can you move it out of sight? It's for Vanessa's niece's debutante ball." Vanessa's niece, of course, it all clicked. This was her latest move, turning my land into a party venue without so much as a note. My land, my work, my peace, all reduced to an inconvenience for a night of champagne and overpriced dresses. I could have yelled, called the cops, or even driven the tractor through their tents. But years dealing with provocations taught me that sometimes the best hit is the one nobody sees coming. I smiled at the decorator, a grin my grandfather called alligator, all teeth, and said, "No problem, partner." He thought he'd... One poor guy. I went to the lodge, grabbed a beer from the fridge to stay calm, and walked to the irrigation control panel, tucked behind some bushes. The system was old but reliable, built to water the field on dry days. But I knew one detail. The water came straight from the creek, and after last week's rain it was more mud than liquid. I turned the valve with a satisfying click. Chaos erupted instantly. Jets of muddy water burst from the ground like vengeful geysers, soaking everything. Guests in suits and high heels screamed, scattering like chickens in a storm. The white tents turned into mud-splattered canvases. Fairy lights flickered and died, and the three-tiered cake, a tower of frosting that probably cost a small village's GDP, collapsed into a shapeless heap, its cherry topper rolling tragically across the grass. I watched it all from the porch, beer in hand, as Vanessa appeared in the middle of the pandemonium. She was in a red dress, her blonde hair now plastered to her face like wet seaweed, screaming like the apocalypse had begun. You did. This," she pointed at me, her voice cutting through the noise of the sprays. I just shrugged and took a sip. "Automatic irrigation, Vanessa. Should have checked the land before trespassing." Someone, probably a bored teenager with a phone, recorded it all. The clip with the guests' shrieks, the cake falling in slow motion, and Vanessa looking like a drenched soap opera villain, went viral before noon. The whole neighborhood laughed. Ms. Marjorie sent a voice note to the general store's group chat, calling it the best show since the '98 rodeo, and even old Jenkins, who never uses his phone, saw it at the bar. For a moment I tasted victory, like I'd planted a flag on the hilltop, but war doesn't let up. I was at the lodge still chuckling at the video while cleaning mud off my boots when the radio on the shelf crackled. I always keep it on, a habit from years listening to emergency calls in the military. The fire department's voice came through flat, "Wildfire, West Sector, near the creek trail." My heart froze. I ran to the porch, the warm afternoon air now carrying a smell I knew too well, smoke. No flames yet, but a grey haze rose from the trees right toward the lodge. My mind raced. No thunder, no lightning, and the woods were damp from recent rain. Fires don't start themselves. Before I even grabbed my phone to call for backup, I knew, with a certainty that weighed heavy in my chest, this wasn't an accident. Vanessa had lost the party battle, but she was dropping napalm in the war. I sprinted to the trail, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. The smell of smoke grew stronger with every step, mixed with the snap of branches and the distant roar of flames. When I reached the hilltop, the world stopped. The lodge, my grandfather's wooden temple, was burning like a living bonfire. Orange and red flames licked the hand-cut boards, each one marked by his calluses and patience. The skylight he'd installed with such pride, where we'd lie on the floor counting stars, shattered into glittering shards that fell like tears on the roof. The fire devoured everything, the porch where he taught me to tie knots, the table where we split firewood and laughter, the echo of his voice saying, "This land's yours, take care of it." Only the chimney held on, black against the sky like a stubborn finger pointing upward, refusing to fall. The firefighters were already there, hoses blasting water that hissed into clouds of steam. Red lights flashed, voices shouted orders. But it was like watching a movie in slow motion. I knew before they told me. The lodge was gone. The beams groaned, collapsing into embers that danced in the wind, and each crack was a piece of my history turning to ash. I stood there, boots rooted in the dirt, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the chaos. I didn't cry, not there, not yet, but I felt an emptiness I can't explain, like part of me had burned with it. Mike, the fire chief, came over, his face smudged with soot and his eyes heavy. He grew up with me, played ball in the street while my grandfather grilled. Burgers. He knew what that place meant. "Sorry, man," he said, voice rough. Then he pulled off his glove and showed me a dented gas can, found in the foundation's rubble. "Didn't fall from the sky. And there's more." He pointed to the trail, where the mud held fresh footprints. Women's boots, small size. Whoever did this didn't bother covering their tracks. My blood ran cold, but not from surprise, from certainty. 3 days earlier, I was at Pete's hunting shop grabbing rope when I saw Vanessa in the aisle. She was trying on new leather boots, shiny, spinning her foot like a model. "Chic safari style," she laughed to the clerk, as if Willow Creek were the savannah. I didn't think much of it then. Now those prints in the mud screamed her name like a neon sign. I looked at the lodge's ruins, smoke curling up in slow spirals, and felt my anger harden into something sharper. This wasn't just a neighbor spat or a fight over land. It was personal, cruel, calculated. Vanessa didn't just want the property. For her luxury condos, she wanted to erase who I was, what my grandfather left behind. She thought fire would break me, that I'd gather the ashes and leave. But she didn't know me. I'd spent years in places where survival meant waiting for the right moment, turning loss into a plan. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. The can, the footprints, the lodge reduced to charcoal. Each snap was a promise. I didn't go running after her, though every muscle screamed to. The image of the lodge in flames still burned behind my eyes, the smoke clinging to my clothes like a ghost. But anger's a trap. It makes you stumble, blinds you. I learned that in deserts where one wrong step was your last. So I went back to the house just yards from the lodge's ashes, with the night silence broken only by the crickets' hum. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where my grandfather made me pancakes when I was a kid, and opened my laptop. My trail cameras were smarter than Vanessa could ever dream. Cloud backup, armored against fire, water, or any HOA tantrum. As the system loaded, I grabbed a water bottle. Beer wasn't for this moment. I needed a clear head. I scoured the footage, scrolling through hours of grainy images, deer crossing the trail, the creek glinting in the sun, an owl staring at the lens like it knew something. Then there it was. Dusk, golden light slicing through. The pines and Vanessa stepping into frame like a B-movie villain. She wore tight black pants and those chic safari boots I'd seen at the store, her blonde hair pulled into a ponytail that swayed as she moved. She carried a red gas can, the kind anyone could grab at the corner station, not even bothering to hide it. She stopped in front of the lodge, stared at the wooden walls, ones my grandfather sanded with calloused hands, and poured the liquid calmly, like she was watering flowers. The gasoline stench must have been strong, but she didn't flinch. She glanced around, a pathetic attempt at stealth, like an amateur in a spy flick who never watched to the end. Then she lit a rag with a lighter, tossed it at the wall's base, and stepped back. The flames erupted, swallowing the boards with a roar the camera couldn't catch, but I felt in my chest just imagining. And Vanessa. She didn't run. She stood there, her face lit by the orange glow, with a smile that wasn't relief or nerves. It was satisfaction, pure venom, like she'd checked off a to-do list. For 5 whole seconds, she stared at the fire, then turned and vanished into the woods, her boots leaving prints I already knew. No mask, no hood, not a shred of caution. Just the air of someone who thinks they're untouchable, who believes the world bends at their feet. I sat frozen, the screen's blue glow reflecting in my eyes. My hand gripped the mouse so hard the plastic creaked. I could have jumped in the Jeep, floored it to her house, pounded on her glossy glass door and cuffed her in front of the whole neighborhood, with folks in pajamas watching. I could have posted the video to the general store's group chat, letting the town laugh at the HOA president turned arsonist. But that'd be easy. That'd be anger. And anger's what she wanted, to knock me off balance, make me throw the chessboard on the floor. No, this was bigger than a fit of rage. It was about justice, the kind my grandfather taught me. Slow, steady, undeniable. I spent days locked in my silent war, building a case so airtight not even Atlanta's best lawyer could crack it. The kitchen table became my headquarters, buried under papers, photos, and mugs of cold coffee. The video of Vanessa dousing the lodge was the star, but a single silver bullet doesn't win a war. I needed more, an arsenal to show who she really was. I started with the gasoline. The red can in the footage had a faded sticker, but I recognized the logo from Earl's Gas station on the edge of town. I went there one rainy morning, using the excuse of filling the Jeep's tank. While Earl wiped the windshield, I made small talk. "Anyone buying gas in cans lately?" He laughed, scratching his beard. "Yup, that snooty blonde Vanessa. Paid with a card, day before the fire. Even griped that the can messed up her nails." I asked for the receipt, just in case. Earl rummaged through a cluttered drawer and found it. Vanessa Marie Caldwell, 10 gallons, paid at 2:37 p.m., signed and stamped. Back at the table, I dug into the neighbors. Vanessa wasn't just my problem, she was a community plague. I knocked on Ms. Marjorie's door and she greeted me with tea and outrage. She showed me a $50 fine for misaligned flower beds because her roses grew 2 inches past regulation. "Who measures that with a ruler?" she huffed, waving the letter with the HOA's tacky logo. Old Jenkins, still chuckling about the soaked party video, admitted he stopped hanging Christmas lights after Vanessa threatened to sue him for non-standard aesthetics. Non-standard, the guy who mows his lawn blasting Johnny Cash. Each story painted a stroke in the portrait of a woman who ruled by intimidation, a suburban dictator with a clipboard and a gold pen. Then I went deeper. The HOA was Vanessa's castle, but castles have cracks. I asked Tom, the retired lawyer who'd rather fish than work, to dig into public records. He came back with gold. Vanessa had forged meeting minutes to oust the other HOA board members. No meetings, no votes, just her signature, scrawled on papers that looked like they came from a cheap printer. She'd seized control like a self-crowned queen, with no one to challenge her. Or so she thought. I had a notebook full of dates, names, and copies, each line a step closer to unmasking her. But the real bombshell dropped from the sky, so unexpected, I nearly spilled my coffee. It was late afternoon, the autumn sky bruised purple when Claire, Vanessa's niece, showed up at the sheriff's station. I was there, dropping off photos for Mike, who was still investigating the fire. Claire, 21, with brown hair and eyes that wouldn't stay still, looked like she was carrying the world's weight. She sat in the plastic chair, wringing her hands, and spilled everything. "Aunt Vanessa wanted your land," she said, her voice shaky but firm. "She's got a deal with a luxury spa developer. Your lodge was the last hurdle to selling it. All. The fire. She said it'd scare you off, make you give up." Claire saw the wet party video and got scared. "I don't want to be part of this," she murmured, handing over a printed email. Vanessa talking to a realtor about clearing the Ramsey lot to seal the deal. I closed the notebook that night. The house's silence broken only by the clock's tick-tock. Every piece of evidence, the receipt, the fines, the forged minutes, Claire's confession, was a puzzle piece, and the final picture was clear. Vanessa wasn't just an annoying neighbor. She was a criminal with a plan, thinking she could torch my past to build her future. Vanessa didn't slow down, on the contrary. She floored it like the devil was in her rear view. While I built my case piece by piece, she was out there playing dirty, spreading poison like it was garden fertilizer. On Monday, a glossy newsletter landed in the neighborhood's mailboxes, stamped with the shiny logo of the HOA she ran single-handedly. The headline, "Safety at Risk." And there I was, in a grainy photo snapped at Pete's general store weeks earlier. I looked beat, with bags under my eyes from a night poring over maps, holding a can of beans like it was a trophy. Vanessa, or some lackey with bargain bin Photoshop skills, had doctored the image, darkened my eyes, jacked up the contrast, made me look like a villain from a cheap action flick. The text claimed that I, Willow Creek's elected sheriff, was dangerous, unstable, a threat to harmony. Harmony, as if finding roses and burning lodges was a symphony. It didn't stop there. She called an emergency meeting at the neighborhood clubhouse, a glass-walled hall where the rich sip gin while pretending to care about community. Laminated flyers flooded the streets, inviting everyone to discuss the future. The target? My sheriff's badge. A poster nailed to the pole outside the general store screamed in bold letters, "Willow Creek above the law." My edited photo was there again, paired with a line saying I disrespected rules and endangered lives. I laughed out loud right there, with Pete giving me a sideways look from the door. Vanessa was digging her own grave with a gold-plated shovel, thinking the neighborhood would swallow her story. Old Jenkins was already eyeing the poster, chuckling so hard he nearly dropped his beer. Miss Marjorie sent a voice note to the neighborhood group. Dangerous is someone who thinks Christmas. Lights are a crime. Her shot was backfiring, but Vanessa never knew when to quit. She went further, as always. On Wednesday, I was at the market buying duct tape to organize my evidence when my radio crackled. It was Mike from the fire department, his voice tight. "Hey, you need to come to the lodge. There's people in the ruins." I ditched my cart in the aisle and tore to the jeep, heart pounding like a drum. When I got there, the scene was surreal. Vanessa, in a navy blazer and gold-rimmed glasses, stood in the ashes of the lodge, pointing and gesturing like she owned the place. Beside her, a guy in a cheap suit, holding a measuring tape and a tablet, sized up the land with the look of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Her shoe prints sliced through the ashes, desecrating what was left of my grandfather. A shiny new easel stood nearby. Future Development Site, Willow Creek Estates. I stepped out of the jeep in uniform, my sheriff's star gleaming on my chest, and walked slowly, letting each step echo on the dirt. The specialist saw me first, eyes wide like I was a gunslinger straight out of a western. Vanessa turned, her fake smile freezing on her face. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice calm but with that edge my grandfather used to hush a barking dog. She stammered, a rare slip, and threw out an excuse so flimsy I almost felt sorry for her. "It's an assessment for community insurance. We're making sure the land's safe, you know, after the incident." Community insurance. As if her HOA had paid a cent for the wood she'd burned herself. I stopped a yard. From her, the lodge's ashes sticking to my boots. "Vanessa," I said, low enough to make her swallow hard, "this is my land. You're trespassing on private property. Leave now or trespassing goes on your resume, with a free trip to the station thrown in." The specialist didn't wait for the end of the sentence. He dropped his tape measure and bolted to his car, tablet flapping like a white flag. Vanessa stayed, lips pursed, eyes glinting with barely veiled hate. "You don't understand how things work," she hissed like I was a stubborn kid. I didn't answer, just pointed to the road, hand steady. She spun on her heels, her shoes crunching ashes, and marched to her gleaming white SUV. The next day dawned with a clear sky, as if Willow Creek knew the storm had passed. I didn't sleep a wink. I'd spent the night at the kitchen table, writing a warrant with the precision of a man sharpening a blade and the fury of one who'd seen his grandfather's legacy burned to dust. The charges formed a list to be proud of: arson, vandalism, fraud, harassment, forgery, trespassing. Vanessa's ego was big, but my document was bigger. I called in some favors around the county. Years as sheriff built connections worth their weight in gold. A friend in the DA's office fast-tracked an audit of the HOA. The verdict hit like thunder. Her official charter was a sham, signatures lifted from an old petition to fix the creek bridge. No HOA, no power, just a woman with a printer and a god complex. The judge voided everything. Fines erased, minutes shredded, her reign reduced to crumbs. I wanted her fall to make noise. I called the neighbors Vanessa had stomped on. Ms. Marjorie fined for her roses. Old Jenkins threatened over Christmas lights. Even the skateboard kid, still sore about his improper parking lecture. "Come to the courthouse tomorrow," I said. "Bring chairs if you want, it's going to be a show." And it was. I rolled up to Vanessa's mansion mid-morning, in uniform, my sheriff's star shining like a warning. Her house screamed new money, white columns, glass doors, a lawn so perfect it looked fake. She was in the garden, lecturing a spooked landscaper about the shoddy paint job on a gazebo, the kind of obsession only she thought mattered. Her white SUV gleamed in the driveway, a trophy that wouldn't last the day. I stepped onto the lawn, radio on my shoulder crackling softly, and shouted, "Vanessa Caldwell!" loud enough to make the neighborhood's curtains twitch. She turned, her wall of arrogance crumbling in seconds. I read the charges slowly, savoring each one. Arson on the Ramsey lot, fraud in HOA records, harassment of residents. The landscaper froze, clutching his hoe like a lifeline. Her face melted, mouth agape, eyes blinking fast, like she was trying to wake from a nightmare. "You can't arrest me!" she shrieked, her voice shrill, almost childish. I held up the warrant, pages steady in my hand. "From a paper castle, Vanessa," I shot back, passing the document to the deputy beside me who was already jingling the cuffs. "Time to meet the real law." The squad car turned into a carnival. Neighbors spilled onto their porches, clapping, whistling. Miss Marjorie waved a dish towel, shouting, "Good riddance." Jenkins, true to form, hooked up a speaker in his yard and blasted Dixie on repeat, the tune echoing off the streetlights. Vanessa tried to bolt once, diving into the bushes like a bad action movie star, screeching about abuse of power. The deputy yanked her back out of patience. It was pathetic, and for a split second I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The courtroom was a demolition. Vanessa showed up with a bargain bin lawyer, slicked back hair and shaky hands, swearing the fire was a misunderstanding. Then we played the video. There she was, clear as day, pouring gasoline on the lodge, tossing a lit rag with a smile. That chilled the blood. The judge leaned forward, squinting, and said, "Play it again." The silence in the courtroom hung heavy as lead, everyone holding their breath as her sick smile glowed on the screen a second time. Her lawyer sank into his chair. Vanessa turned grey like she'd aged a decade. The gavel came down hard. 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, $950,000 in restitution, no insurance to cushion it, since she'd set the fire herself. The mansion went to auction to cover the debt. The designer bags and SUV vanished faster than smoke. Neighbors watched from the lawn, lounging in beach chairs, sipping soda like it was a block party. Jenkins even brought popcorn. I didn't celebrate. Didn't need to. Outside the courthouse, with the breeze carrying the scent of pine and earth, I felt Willow Creek breathe free for the first time in months. The lodge was gone, but its ashes danced in the air, unbound. My grandfather's voice echoed somewhere in my memory. "Take care of the land, son." I did, and that was enough. I rebuilt the lodge, not the same, but better. Treated timber, solar roof, a new sign that reads, "Ramsey's Retreat, Vanessa Proof, since 2025. Vanessa? She's sweeping the park, part of her sentence. Kids film her, laughing. She tries to hide, but the world knows who she is. Sometimes she sends letters claiming she was wronged. They go in the trash. My peace is back, and the land sings again.